Now we're going to talk about the anatomy of a sewing machine needle. The overall needle has a point, an eye where the thread goes. The long area here is called the blade. The slanted area is called the shoulder. And the round area up here is called the shank. And the very top here is called the butt. The shank is the part that goes into the sewing machine. Now the needle has two sides. The front side of the needle is characterized by a long groove that runs the length of the blade and terminates at the eye of the needle. On the opposite side of the long groove is the scarf, also called the spot, and it appears as kind of an indentation on the back side of the needle. It's important that you learn the difference between the two sides of a needle because the long groove needs to go to your left when you're threading the Lockstitch machine, and we'll demonstrate that a little bit later. The scarf is going to go on the right. Now up here on the shank of the needle, you'll see some writing. It says orange 12. 12 refers to the size of the needle in the needle sizing. So if you've got really good eyes or a magnifying glass or a wonderful camera, it's easy to read, but without that, any of those aids, it can be kind of tough. Now, to make a stitch, the Lockstitch machine requires two devices. One is a bobbin. This is an empty bobbin. It has holes on one side and none on the other side. Some of the bobbins have holes on both sides. The holes function is just to show you when there is thread on the bobbin or when you're getting awfully close to the end. So it gives you an idea of how full the bobbin is when you're looking at it, when it's inside the bobbin case. This is the bobbin case. It has a thumb latch, which is useful for holding the bobbin as you're trying to load it in the machine. So it's a little spring lock that actually grabs the edge of the bobbin right here, this little guy. You can see it move as I move the thumb latch. That's what grabs the bobbin and keeps it in the bobbin case when you're loading this into the sewing machine. There are two screws here and here that hold a spring clamp, which is what creates the tension on the bobbin case. The larger of the two screws, this one, is the one that you would adjust. You'd use the slot screwdriver, the smaller slot screwdriver, turn the screw to the right to tighten the tension, turn the screw to the left to loosen the tension. Remember, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. This screw here merely holds the spring clamp in place. There's a slot here for the thread to go through. The thread runs underneath the spring clamp and comes out the eye of the bobbin here. Now, I want to show you two bobbins. One is very nicely wound and one is very poorly wound. This is the nicely wound bobbin. Look at that. Those threads lie